Clementine was still surprised to see Kenny right in front of her. She didn't waste another second. She ran up and hugged the man. She thought he was dead this whole entire time. She was glad that she was still wrong. They were separated from the hug, and Kenny knelt down to the quite eye level with the girl. "These people are with you?" Kenny asked. Clementine smiled and nodded her head. Kenny then stood up and said, "We could talk inside." "Good, I'm just about to make dinner," the man in the red sweatshirt said. "Are you sure you won't mind?" Carlos said. "It's going to storm soon. Please come in," the man said. The red sweatshirt insisted. Kenny turned away and led the entrance into the ski lodge, with the rest of the group following behind him. Clementine walked alongside him. She still couldn't believe that he was alive. The man in the red sweatshirt held the door for Clementine and Kenny to enter. Clementine was amazed what she was seeing. The ski lodge seemed cozy and had electricity, which added a bonus over the cabin that she and her family and her friends stayed in. She saw that Christmas lights were wrapped up around columns, and the man in the red sweatshirt joined Kenny, and Clementine walked with them. Kenny, and of course, Sarita, have been staying with us for several weeks. It used to be a ski lodge, obviously, so there's plenty of food, the man said as he walked upstairs. Believe it or not, we still get power from that wind turbine up front. We tend to keep the lights off at night to avoid drawing any attention. Kenny turned around and to Clementine and began mocking the man with nagging the gesture as the man continued. "But after we found this stuff in storage, we couldn't resist making an exception." Clementine giggled at Kenny's antics as the man turned around. "Something funny?" "Oh, nothing, Walt," Kenny replied. He walked up the stairs and introduced his friend to Clementine. Walter was their one smart son of a bitch. He also made very good can of beans, Kenny said as he patted Walter on the back. "Well, why don't you two catch up while I get dinner started?" Walter suggested. Clementine turned around and heard the front door open. She saw Luke and Nick, her adoptive father and her mother, stare in surprise. It had been a long time since they had lights. Genevieve was more surprised. She's never seen lights before. "Please make yourselves at home. You can leave your things over there," Walter said, gestured to the bench. However, the group was hesitant. "I'm holding my rifle just in case," Nick said, which broke the silence. "Thanks. Maybe we should all put our weapons over the bench. Not just us," Alvin said. "Very well. Kenny," Walter said as he gestured towards the bench. Kenny looked to Clementine and he had a skeptical look on his face. It seemed like he wasn't so sure about placing his rifle on the bench. "Would you vouch for these people, Clem? If you say that they're good, I'll place my weapon on the bench," Kenny said. "Yeah, they're good," Clementine said. The door opened again and the Indian-American woman, Matthew, Carlos, Sarah, and Zeke entered the lodge. "Dad, look! A Christmas tree!" Sarah said. She was excited to see the tree. "Not now, sweetie," Carlos said as he placed an arm around her shoulder. "Isn't it great? We found it all in storage," the Indian-American woman said. "It's amazing," Sarah said. Kenny smiled at the young girl before descending from the stairs to place his hunting rifle on the bench. Luke joined them and he placed his machete on the bench. Soon after, the rest of the group put their weapons and supplies on the bench. Once everyone had placed their weapons and supplies on the bench, the woman said, "Good. Will you all please follow me? I will show you where you can all sleep." From there, she gives a tour to Nick, Sarah, Zeke, Luke, Alvin, Rebecca, Genevieve, and Carlos. "Well, I think I'm going to stay here for the rest of the night," Matthew said. "I don't want to get caught up in the storm." "That would be a good idea," Walter said. "Come on, please help me with dinner," Matthew nodded in response, before he followed the older man to the makeshift kitchen. Kenny and Clementine headed for the living room where it was a nice warm fire was. They sat across from each other as Kenny looked towards Clementine with a smile. "Still wearing that same dirty old thing?" Kenny said as he tapped the brim of Clementine's hat. "You know, just half expected Lee to walk up with you. You two were like peas in a pod." Kenny then jumped back upon seeing Clementine look down with a frown. "Aw, shit, I didn't. It's just so hard not to think about him." Clementine looked up. It would always be hard to not think about Lee, But thanks to her adoptive parents and the support of her new friends, she had came to realize that she couldn't keep blaming herself. She was wrong. It wasn't her fault that he died. He died to save her life. He saved me, Clementine said. She could finally say the sentence without having the tang of remorse or a nagging thought of it back in her head saying it was all her fault. I knew it, Kenny said. I knew he would. That guy had a fire in him. Sure as shit. Kenny then looked down with a frown. He was remembering everything that Lee did for him as a friend. Hell, he was one hell of a guy. When my son, well, he helped me through that. He took care of him, and when I couldn't, I'll never forget it. Kenny finished the last sentence with more optimism. So where are you heading up? I was outside of Savannah when Luke found me. He and a woman named Tavia took me into their community. I met a lot of good people there, got stronger and smarter, and even I got to be a kid again. But it didn't stay like that. The man in charge, he got worse as time went on. We had to leave, and now we're going back on the road again, Clementine said. I see. So Mead and Krista didn't find you? Kenny asked. Clementine shook her head. They tried to find me. A boy in my group. Was with them for the longest time. And that baby, that's Genevieve. She's Krista and Omid's daughter. Kenny's eyes widened and a smile formed on his lips. Wabi. I can't believe that. Are they? Clementine frowned and she said, Krista died soon after Genevieve was born, and then Omid was ambushed. I think Zeke would have known more than me. Zeke, huh? Is that the boy? Kenny said. Clementine nodded in response. So where have you been? Clementine asked. Oh, I've been everywhere after Savannah, Kenny replied. How did you get out of there? Clementine asked. Kenny scoffed and said, For some reason I went back to try and save that shitbird Ben, and then it turned into a damn cluster. Kenny took off towards the fire of the distant expression on his face. After a couple of seconds, he turned back to Clementine. Couldn't help the kid, but I just made it out. Long story short, I got real lucky. Lucky that I spent the night alone after that, Kenny then spaced out. He obviously went through some nightmares after Savannah, just like Clementine. Then I met Sarita. Thank goodness, gosh, it's great to have you back. The Indian-American woman approached the two and said, Are you two catching up? Clem, this is my girl Sarita. Isn't she beautiful? Kenny asked as he looked to the woman. Sarita rolled her eyes at the antics of her boyfriend. She said, It's nice to meet you, Clementine. It's nice to meet you too, Clementine said. She turned to the group to help back from the tour from the ski lodge. Is there anything we could do to help? Luke asked Kenny. Yeah, I could use to help some moving some supplies before that storm hits, Kenny said. Alright, come on, Nick, Luke said as he and Nick followed Kenny outside. Clementine, how about you help me decorate the tree? Sarita said. Sure, Clementine said with a smile. She hadn't decorated a Christmas tree in a long time. She went over and started decorating the tree. Meanwhile, Alvin and Rebecca laid out some toys for Genevieve to play with. They watched and played with the toddler as she played with the toys. Can we help? Sarah asked Sarita. Certainly, Sarita said. Cool, come on, Zeke, Sarah said as she dragged him over to the Christmas tree. You've decorated a Christmas tree before, right? Yeah, Zeke said. He seemed to be in another world where he stared at the Christmas tree. What's wrong? Sarah asked. Zeke didn't respond. Memories flowed within his mind. If they were going backwards, he was experiencing yet another flashback. He could almost feel the cold air again, and worst of all, he could hear his brother's voice. This is so cool, Decker said. I'm glad we do this every year. Me too, Zeke said. They were standing in front of the coniferous evergreen tree in the woods they decorated each year for Christmas Day. It was nice, but far from perfect. Their ornaments were either busted or cracked. They didn't have the money to buy newer ones, but Decker enjoyed it regardless. Here, Zeke said, as he handed the box to Decker. It was his Christmas present to the young boy, even though it wasn't wrapped. Zeke, you didn't have to get me anything, Decker said. Zeke scoffed and said, Just open it. Decker smiled as he opened the box. Inside was a medium-sized dog plush toy. No way! How did you? Decker exclaimed. You stare at it all the time when we got to the supermarket. I can't get your real dog, but I thought this would be the next best thing. Zeke said. Decker smiled before he hugged his older brother. Thanks, Zeke, you're the best. Zeke returned to the hug, although it may have been a good life for either of them, but Zeke treasured it the moments. Zeke? He heard a familiar voice that brought him right out of the flashback. He looked to see that the 8-year-old brother was nowhere to be seen. Instead, it was Sarah, and Clementine who was staring at him from the world of stairs. Zeke, are you all right? Sarah asked. Yeah, it's just... This brings me back memories, Zeke said. You and your brother used to decorate this for Christmas, right? Sarah asked. Zeke nodded and he said, Yeah, I just need to get some air. I'll come with you, Sarah said. Zeke smiled at the girl before he proceeded to head outside. The air was crisp and cool. He looked out of the forest to see Sarah hugged him. I know you missed your brother. I know what it's like, what you're thinking about back out there. Zeke nodded and he said, Everything just keeps reminding me of him. We should always take some ornaments out to the forest and decorate one of the trees on Christmas. I would go out and shovel the driveway so I could get him a gift. That's sweet of you, Zeke, Sarah said. The last thing I ever got him was a dog plush toy, Zeke said as he felt his tears burning in his eyes. Told him I couldn't get the real deal, so I went for the next best thing. But that didn't matter to him. He loved it. I gave it to him while he was dying in my arms, and I buried it with him. If it wasn't crying before, he was now. Sarah released her grip in front of him and began to hug him. It's all right. He's happy now, Sarah said in an attempt to comfort her boyfriend. Zeke continued to cry on the shoulder as the teenage girl swayed back and forth with them. They remained that way for several minutes.